Madison, First Universalist Church of New Madison, on this really nice summer day. Glad to have everybody here. We are having Roberta is bringing some stuff from the New York Times again, kind of an update on Haiti. And I looked up a little bit of history, so we'll do that. So our slides are all going to be Haiti. This is a very optimistic, this is not what most people think of when they think of Haiti, but Haiti can be and is in places a really beautiful place. They've just been dogged by a history of problems that are pretty much unbelievable. Do we have any announcements?
Just a couple of dates. I think our museum visit is coming up on Saturday, the 18th of June.
Saturday the 18th.
And then, of course, we're also going to join El Dorado, the congregation, on the July 3rd right at the park, like we did last year. A little bit of a brief service, devotional thing, and then we'll have a little picnic there. We'll release more details on that. But July 3rd, on a Sunday.
That was nice.
It was very nice last year, I thought,
yes,
as well. And then on the 17th, more than likely, just kind of tucked out of the way, that's the third Sunday. We'll want to probably have our annual church meeting then. So I'll put information out on that. We'll have our annual meeting. Okay. Well, birthday party.
Can I ask a question, please?
Yes.
Do we take a carry-in from here to go there?
Yeah, we did last year. Yes,
That's what I
we did.
thought.
So, but I'll get more detail on it with Derek will be coming back in the next couple of weeks. He's on vacation right now.
Okay, thank you.
And Derek did send an email. He wants us to bring table covers, which I don't remember if we did or not. We can.
We did.
Yeah, that's not a problem.
And we brought drinks last night.
And drinks. We bought coffee, juice, and we'll bring some soda pop or lemonade or whatever. We'll sort that out. They usually have plenty of food, but you're always welcome. I'll always bring a cake, maybe a 7-layer salad or something. So you're always welcome to bring something that you want to make sure you get in a picnic. If you don't bring it, can't be sure you're going to get it. So, and then the 18th, that's going to be the Garst Museum. We haven't really settled on a time yet. We need to decide whether we want to eat first and then go to the Garst, or whether we want to go to the Garst and then go eat. And then we need suggestions on where you would like to eat. We can go kind of highbrow. We can go to the Merchant House and sit down. They've got the family style sitting, which is kind of interesting. Or we can go to what's the cabin? Jack's Cabin. I've been there a couple times. That's a decent place. Or there's a bunch of places out on Wagner, out by Walmart. There's a bunch of places out in that direction. So
a lighter meal, we could go to Montage.
Yeah, or you can go to Montage and just want something quick. So be thinking about that. What your preference is, let us know. We don't have to decide that till the Sunday before.
And museum is open until 4, so we'll want to make sure that we allow at least, probably won't be walking around for 2 hours, but at least 2 hours.
I would say
so
yes.
Kind of work somewhere around that.
We want to be at the museum by 2, and as we talked before, we can eat and then go, or we can do what all us old people do. We always eat at 4:30 or 5 anyway, so we get the discount.
So we might need to determine the average age of the group before we make that decision.
Unless we get a lot of visitors from some other planet, I think the average age is going to be pretty much assumed. It's not going down much, I don't think. All right, anything else? Can't think of anything right now. So if you think of something else, just throw it in later. All right, our prelude. On a clear day, you can see forever, and that almost is today. Beautiful, thank you. On a clear day. If only we could have some clear thinking instead of just clear weather. Our chalice lighting, Come Whoever You Are, by Marilyn Falkowski. We welcome you. We know you come here for different reasons, to find community, to seek your spiritual and personal truths, to question, to nurture your heart and soul, to be nurtured, to explore new ideas, to find comfort, and perhaps to find the answers to some of your bigger questions. We welcome you. We know you come from different places, different religions, different beliefs, different backgrounds. We hope you will find comfort, connection, challenge, and love here. We hope you will find ways to provide outreach to others in our community, in our world community. Our opening hymn is 21, For the Beauty of the Earth. pictures or nature or something. What spurred that was Margaret has done a pen and ink drawing, which she sent. I think everybody got one. If you didn't, Mike helpfully printed it off on his computer, and it's back there to look at of a sea turtle. Amazingly accomplished. So we're going to have that. Hopefully, if I can figure out how to get it up on a slide, we'll do that. And then we'll talk about not only sea turtles, but other endangered creatures and other interactions between us and the natural world. We have lots of other pictures. Roberta has a notebook or a collection book was that from Jeff when he was in Haiti?
It was from Haiti.
Yes,
that was-
and it's when Dave and I were there too.
And that was quite a few years ago. Quite a few years ago. So I don't think Haiti has changed that much, but Jeff and Roberta and Dave have all changed quite a bit. So, but she has some pictures that she brought, and I have some pictures that I've got of Haiti here too. So we'll go with that. Our children's story: Catch a Ride on a Rainbow. Oh, first, as we're doing Haiti. In case you don't really remember, this is Haiti on the map. If you look at the top, can't really see it on this one, Cuba. Everybody knows where Cuba is. Haiti and the Dominican Republic share an island, Hispaniola. And this is Haiti on the bottom and also on the side here.
Catch a Ride on Raindrops by Uvalde. Splash in the puddles, jump in the rain. Catch a ride on raindrops, falling from the sky. Rain hits the ground and seeps far below, down where the worms live, past where the termites dig. Snakes slide and ants creep, down the rain seeps. Trickle between rocks, squeeze into cracks. Moisture moves out of sight, deep underground. Spring from the earth, rush with the streams. Race with the fishes, far across the land. Warmed by the sun, up the water floats. Into skies far above, vapor turns to cloud. Thundering in the sky, they bulge and rumble and grow, till water bursts in pouring rain down to the earth again. How to ride the water cycle. Water travels far and takes many forms over the course of the water cycle. It comes to the earth as rain from the sky. It fills rivers and seeps into the ground to join the water table. The water table, like a river underground, emerges into open air in the form of springs and lakes. Water travels up into the sky as vapor when it's warmed by the sun and comes together as wispy clouds. When clouds grow dark and heavy with water, they open with pouring rain, bringing water back to earth once more. The end. Thank you for reading with Storyberries.com. Free stories for kids.
My favorite supplier. Number one, she's from Australia, so I love the accent. Number two, it's free. And number three, they always have really interesting stories and they're really well done. So we'll keep on doing that unless somebody has suggestions for something else. Okay, our affirmation. Choose to Bless the World by Rebecca Parker. Your gifts, whatever you discover them to be, can be used to bless or curse the world. The mind's power, the strength of the hands, the reaches of the heart, the gift of speaking, listening, imagining, seeing, waiting. Any of these can serve to feed the hungry, bind up wounds, welcome the stranger, praise what is sacred, do the work of justice, or offer love. And any of these can draw down the prison door, hoard bread, abandon the poor, obscure what is holy, comply with injustice, or withhold love. You must answer this question: what will you do with your gifts? Choose to bless the world. The choice to bless the world is more than an act of will, a moving forward into the world with the intention to do good. It is an act of recognition, a confession of surprise, a grateful acknowledgement that in the midst of a broken world, unspeakable beauty, grace, and mystery abide. There is an embrace of kindness that encompasses all life, even yours. And while there is injustice, anesthetization, or evil, there moves a holy disturbance, a benevolent rage, a revolutionary love, protesting, urging, insisting. For that which is sacred will not be defiled. Those who bless the world live their life as a gesture of thanks for this beauty and this rage. The choice to bless the world can take you into solitude, to search for the sources of power and grace, native wisdom, healing, and liberation. More, the choice will draw you into community, the endeavor shared, the heritage passed on, the companionship of struggle, the importance of keeping faith, the life of ritual and praise, the comfort of human friendship, the company of earth, the chorus of life welcoming you. None of us alone can save the world. Together, that is another possibility waiting. Joys and concerns.
Your children's story made me think about the rain we've been getting. We've actually been getting, I think, pretty good rain. And when you consider the drought that's going on out in the west, we're lucky in the global warming. My professor, geology professor and colleague said that for every 10 inches of rain we get, 1 inch goes to the water tables. And I think right now our water tables are in pretty good shape. We did have a drought here about 20 years ago. I can remember that water tables got kind of low. It's been scary. I've never forgotten that. So every time, sometimes when it rains, I'm like, oh darn it, I need to go out and do this or that. But I always try to remind myself what a blessing it is, what a joy it is to get going with rain.
It's all in the balance. It's like a weed is a plant somewhere you don't want it. Rain in the spring. This year, the farmers were having a terrible time getting crops out. Usually they're done by the 15th or 20th of May. Some are not done yet. There are still fields that aren't planted even today, although I'm sure they're being planted today because we've had a couple of days of warm weather. But nature is a pretty amazing force that we have to learn to live with, even though we've pretty much taken control of it with our global warming and our excess production of CO2. We still have a choice to whether we accept that or not. Mike?
I don't think that they should pass without recognizing the Platinum Jubilee 70 years of Her Majesty Elizabeth II.
Yes.
Of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And 70 years. Many people have different ideas of royalty and reigns and what have you in this modern world. But looking at her from a worldwide figure, and what she's given over 70 years of her life and more, I think surely does deserve the attention, in my opinion, as it's getting the world today.
Yes, an anomaly in a world changing, and we will discuss as we go along democracy. I've ordered a new book from the library. I'll give you a little tidbit of what excited my interest. The new research is showing, we've talked before about the progression of civilization, how we gather together in agricultural communities and then had surpluses and then got bureaucrats. military specialists, religious specialists, everybody that kind of drained the power of the working people or kind of rode herd on the working people and took their surplus and used it to their own advantage. The new supposition is, from the new study of history, is that democracies were the first origin. The first societies were all organized on a democratic basis where everybody was equal. The first agricultural societies, instead of thinking that everybody had a chief or a priest or someone who was the ruler, they started out democratically and then fell into these other forms of government, which is promising on the one hand and scary on the other. That means democracy is not an end product that will stay with us. It means it's something that ebbs and flows, and something that we have one day, and if we don't keep it, if we don't work to keep it, we may not have it much longer.
I can still remember when I was about 10 years old, right around there, the Queen got made the Queen. And I can remember, and that was before I started being a guy that was looking at women and thinking, oh, some of these women are really pretty. That was before that, but despite that, I thought she is so pretty. But my mother tried to teach me when I was growing up that when you start dating, you should look for the good inside as well as the beauty inside as well as the beauty outside. And the Queen has that. She's a beautiful person both inside and out. She's done a really good job of being the Queen, and she's always been a good person. As well as she was a doll when she was,
And she has had trials and tribulations to deal with, and I think has dealt with them pretty admirably with divorce. I'm not going to say anything more about that with her children. So a number of them have been problem childs. Let's put it that way.
Say one more thing, in
Yes.
terms of a concern you brought up about our government and democracy, what have you. Obviously, this week the hearings start on the January 6th incident. I will use loosely that term at the Capitol. And I think that will be a test of our government again. I know it's being tested all the time, but in terms of the political process, whether it's hyper-partisan or not, we have processes in place that allow that to take place. And so as it progresses, hopefully with open minds, let it proceed. I already heard several wonderful quotes, and one of them might be, and I won't quote it, I'll simply paraphrase it, might this entire issue be a morality issue versus a governance issue? So time will tell.
And I agree. Morality, I think, is at the basis of governance. And that brings us to Jenna Powell. The bill she has introduced, I think it's 151, to outlaw any transgender person in any sport.
What?
Yes, that is it's being ready to be passed by the Senate, and then I'm sure the governor will sign it. Well, I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure, since it's election year, he will sign it. And what is interesting about this law is if there's a question about that, they are going to do a physical exam of the person. So these are the people who talk about freedom and independence, and these are the people who are going to subject these kids who want to be on a sports team to a physical exam. The only point of interest that comes to me, being somewhat of a cynic and also somewhat of someone who is not unwilling to poke somebody in the eye if it's necessary, I would consider, if I was a parent in that high school, picking out the school board's son or daughter and saying, are you sure that's really a boy or a girl? I want someone to take a look at that and see. I mean, any parent can ask for this investigation, and everybody assumes that it'll only be the kids who say that they are one gender or another. But you can take some kid who's grown up, whatever, and ask a question and say, you have to prove it. You have to get a DNA test. You have to have a doctor do a physical exam and write out a certificate. So this is one of those things, sometimes people don't think through the laws they're passing, and there are ways that can turn around and come back and bite you. So that's just a thought that has crossed my mind. If this does pass, the report I said there is only one transgender person right now on any sports team in the entire state of Ohio. So this is not something it's a critical problem that we need laws to pass. It's something that they use, like they used abortion, they use all these other hot button items to get people fired up that they have. And I've seen people on my Facebook pages that I attend talking about how terrible it is. You should know whether you're a boy or a girl, and God gave that to you, and you can't argue with it. No real understanding of what humanity is all about. And speaking of which, the LGBTQ, whatever those letters are,
It's plus now, the end of it.
plus Scott, I think his name is Snyder, is the moderator of their Facebook page. They were in Greenville passing out what he calls swag, which I assume is like trinkets or something for LGBTQ plus. And I notified him that we would be glad to take something here to display at the church if he had something that was tasteful and that we could display in support. So we'll see if we can manage to get together, but that's in the works. We support anybody, any freedom, any choice you make, as long as it's not harmful to anybody else, as long as you do not disparage or are unpleasant with somebody else. You are more than welcome to come here.
At the same time, I agree with you that we don't need a law, but I heard a female swimming coach on the college level give a very well thought out speech about young women who swim and all of the work and sacrifice that they put into it. And what a threat letting men who say that they're women compete against these women in college swimming. And there was a guy somewhere in some school here in the United States that won a medal as a woman. And I will tell you that I am very much against that. I'm very much against men and boys competing against women and girls in sports. I'm very much against it. Derek and I discussed it one time, and Derek says that there's men and boys that, because of the meds they're taking and have been taking, it is a fair competition. But there are other men and boys who haven't been taking the meds, and it is not, in that case, a fair competition. And we all know that Derek is not prejudiced against, I'm a little bit prejudiced, not against trans, but against the idea that you can be a boy and then compete against girls in sports. So
The NCAA, the College Athletic Association, there is a new rule in place that you have to have a blood test. And if your testosterone level is over a certain amount, you're not allowed to compete.
that's what Derek was referring to.
Exactly. So when you're competing as a boy who's chosen to be a woman, your testosterone level, in other words, the things that give you excellent athletic ability are the same as a woman's, because you're taking the chemicals that inhibit the male hormones. So your hormone level is the same as a woman's hormone level. That's actually, they want to be women, they don't want to be men. So that's how they achieve that. And that's part of what's going on in Texas and places like that, where they're passing laws that you can't give kids the medications to support what their gender identity is. They're making it impossible for these people to, it's a complicated thing, and we'll go into it again. But if you let nature take its course and let people be free, as they always say they should be, there are ways around all of this that are understandable, scientific, and moral to find the answer to. We do not want to forget Ukraine. And I'm beginning to think the United States is beginning to look like the Ukraine. You can see things on YouTube of the battles that the Ukrainians are fighting against the Russians with their automatic weapons. If you go back to Texas, if you go to Oklahoma, where the doctor, actually 2 doctors were killed by a disgruntled patient who had back surgery and 30 days later was still having pain, which I can tell you, anybody in surgery is still going to have pain after 30 days. I don't know what the doctor's response was. Obviously, the doctor can't magically make it go away, but this guy went to the gun store, bought an AR-15, 2 hours later went to the hospital, killed not only his doctor, killed his doctor's partner, killed the receptionist, and killed another patient who just happened to be in the room. And then, of course, killed himself. Wisconsin, Racine, there was a party at a cemetery. 2 people were killed there. Philadelphia, just this morning or last night, early in the night, 3 people were killed in Philadelphia and 9 or 10 people wounded. We are having an epidemic of gun violence. And if the answer was everybody, the more guns there are, the safer we are, if that was the case, this would be the safest country in the world because we have more guns. We have more guns than people in this country. No other country has anything near that, and no other country has the history that we have of gun violence. The countries that do, Australia, 15 years ago, had a mass shooting of like 52 people. They actually collected all the semi-automatic weapons and destroyed them. Went around and took them from people. I think they paid compensation. They haven't had a mass shooting since. England had a shooting 20 or 30 years ago in a school where a bunch of kids were killed. They went around and started registration and laws that you have to lock up your gun. You can't have automatic weapons, but you can have shotguns and rifles for hunting. They are big on hunting, but you have to lock your gun up, and it has to be licensed, and it has to be registered, and you have to be responsible for who's using your gun. They have not had a mass shooting since. So we go over this, and I guess we'll keep going over it until we get some kind of answers. I'm not lighting enough candles. For the kids in Texas, the funerals are still going on. We don't have enough candles for all those kids. And don't tell me the answer is to lock the door and have an armed guard at the door to protect every school in America. That door, they tried to blame the women teacher for leaving the door open. She closed the door. It didn't lock automatically like it was supposed to. That school has 4 armed policemen. One of the policemen was there outside the building and saw the guy shooting at the people outside. There were 19 policemen in the hallway waiting while that guy was inside the building. Kids were on their phones calling 911 saying, "Come help us." They sat outside the hallway while he kept on killing kids. Maybe we need to do what I've heard offered. We need to take pictures of these kids and show them to people. The parents could not identify them. They had to use DNA to see what kid was what, because when an automatic weapon shoots a 10-year-old kid that weighs 60 pounds, it shreds them into something that is not even recognizable as a human being. If you remember the kid that was killed in Georgia, Florida, wherever it was, a long time ago that started the civil rights movement. I can't remember his name right now. He was beat up, hung, and thrown in the river. His mother had an open casket funeral in Chicago, where he was from. People saw what these people did to this kid, and that's pretty much what ignited, is what I've heard, ignited the civil rights movement, by people actually seeing, instead of this sanitized thing, a nice little funeral with a closed casket, everybody feels sorry. They need to see what the results are of all these crazy people having guns. And don't tell me it's mental health. Texas loosened gun regulations. At the same time, they reduced funding for mental health. This is what they're saying. We are sacrificing our children on the altar of the Second Amendment. And I will keep repeating that as we go along. All right. I have to get off my high horse now. Anybody have anything else? All right, for those thoughts and prayers, those worries, those problems in your life that you don't feel able to express out loud, know that we support you in whatever way you can. If you need something, please come to us. We are more than willing to help. All right. Our message, revisit Haiti with Roberta. And this painting is, anybody guess what this is?
It's Columbus, I think.
It's Columbus, 1492, sailed the ocean blue and discovered not the island of Haiti, but Hispaniola is the original name, a combination of Dominican Republic and Haiti. This is the natives coming, greeting Columbus, saying, you know, you seem to be far advanced and nice people. We welcome you to our island. What a big mistake that was.
Okay, I don't have a whole lot here, but I brought some things for you to look at in the back. Jeff was posted to Haiti, his first posting in the Foreign Service. And he was there in 1986 and 1987, and his wife, Mary, was in the Dominican Republic, serving in the Foreign Service at the same time. I think that's possibly where they met. Okay. Let's see. The ransom. Now that's a picture of Haiti burning. And I have a newspaper with some really wonderful photos that you can all see afterward. More than 70 years before Americans abolished slavery, enslaved Africans in the French colony of Saint Dominique, and by the way, I don't pronounce French very well, so you'll have to work around that. Africans in the French colony of Saint Dominique threw off their shackles and rebelled. Next, they beat Napoleon's forces and declared independence, creating the first free black country in the Americas, Haiti. 2 decades later, a brigade of French warships loomed off Haiti's coastline. The French issued an ultimatum: war or hand over a staggering sum in reparation to Haiti's former enslavers. It was known as the independence debt, but that was a misnomer. It was actually a ransom. Haiti paid for generations. The New York Times scoured thousands of pages of original documents in Haiti, France, and the United States to determine exactly how much Haitians paid for their freedom. Now, we'll be investigating Haiti's double debt. In June 2021, Constant Mayhoud and Matt Apuzu, 2 New York Times journalists, arrived in Bordeaux, a port city in southwestern France. They were there to visit the private archive of Francois Blancpain, a historian who specializes in Haiti. They were there in the hopes that they could begin to answer a question that had been on their minds for months. How much money did Haitians over generations pay to their former French slave masters? More than 200 years ago, enslaved Haitians successfully revolted against their French masters and declared themselves free. 2 decades later, the French government demanded Haitians pay reparations to former slave masters under the threat of war. Without the funds to pay, Haitians had to take out a loan from French banks. This would become to be known as the double debt, and is part of the reason Haiti is one of the poorest countries in the world today, after their double debt. Times journalists spent more than a year sifting through thousands of pages of archival papers, ledgers, and correspondences to calculate the exact amount that Haiti paid France. $560 million in today's dollars. Leading historians who assessed the Times work said it is the first time this amount had been tabulated. Further estimates by the Times found that the double debt cost Haiti from $21 billion to $115 billion in lost economic growth over time. Those findings and more are explored in a new 5-part Times investigation that chronicles the history of the debt, who profited from it, and how it still affects Haiti today. Times reporters tracked down more than 30 descendants of French families that received those payments. They interviewed dozens of sources and traveled to banks, little-known libraries, and archives to hunt down answers. So that's why the Times has this big article which we just received. Learning who benefited and who suffered was not the only goal. The bigger question at the end was, what did it mean? Said Catherine Porter. You've all heard her name. She is an international correspondent who has covered Haiti since the 2010 earthquake. Now, you all remember the 2010 earthquake that we We were very aware of it, and we tried to help with that. And the picture hanging on the wall back there, son Jeff had done before that earthquake. But after the earthquake, of course, those buildings did not look like they do in the picture. And how did the earthquake hamper the development of the country? The concept grew out of Ms. Porter's initial investigations into the debt in 2020 and a conversation with Michael Slackman, the assistant managing editor for International News. They wanted to know what had made Haiti an outlier in terms of its extreme poverty and corruption. But the arrival of the pandemic put a hold on travel, and the article was paused. In April 2021, they decided it was time to investigate. With travel restrictions still in place, Mr. Mayhood, who reports for the Times from the Paris Bureau, joined the effort. He was able to gain access to the French bank records, archives, and libraries that would aid in tracing the debt between bankers, Haitians, and former masters and their descendants. Around the same time, Mr. Apuzu and Salem somebody, both international investigative reporters, were tapped to report. The four journalists focused on different parts of the investigation. Ms. Porter traveled to Haiti, where she interviewed residents and current and former politicians, including Haiti's former president, who was the first democratically elected president after decades of dictatorship. Jean-Bertrand Aristide was the dictator. While Ms. Porter looked into the effects of the debt in Haiti, Mr. Mayhood traced payments and bank records, meticulously logging figures into a spreadsheet. Mr. Apuzu and Ms. So-and-so investigated the financiers and the United States' role in the debts that weighed down Haiti for more than a century. We were covering such a vast time period that we had to speak to a lot of historians piecemeal for every little aspect of the reporting. The four stayed in close contact and revealed their findings in shared documents and WhatsApp group chats. The double debt is rarely, if ever, taught in French classrooms. Many Haitians are not aware of it either. The team hopes to add new information to the conversation. Haiti is so often looked at through the lens of poverty and corruption, Ms. Porter said. The country, though, saw a successful human rights uprising and established itself as an independent nation in 1804, years before Britain outlawed slavery or before the American Civil War began. Throughout the investigation, Ms. Porter said she understood Haiti to be a crucible of changing the world in many ways. So that, and then the ransom, have the big picture, the ransom. And I'll put the paper back so you can see all the pictures, which will help understand what I was talking about. Thank you.
This is a picture of the revolution. This is the Haitians on this side and the French troops on the other. This is when they declared their independence. And I have a little kind of a timeline here. Christopher Columbus lands on what is now Hispaniola. That's shared by Haiti, the Dominican Republic. He claimed it for the Spanish monarchs, Ferdinand and Isabella. This is the beginning, regarded as the beginning of Haiti's written history. The island had been inhabited by indigenous Taino, who referred to the land as Haiti, since BC era and had a rich history long before the Spanish conquest. In 1697, Spain ceded its western Hispaniola to France. Under French rule, San Domingo is the country's richest colony in the 18th century, producing half of all the sugar and coffee bought and sold in Europe and accounting for 1/3 of the Atlantic slave trade. This is the riches, the wealth of Haiti is in coffee and sugar, which when coffee and sugar were first discovered were considered items that the wealthy used. The prices were astronomical, and the people who grew that and who ran the country became unbelievably wealthy. In 1789, the French Revolution makes more people on both sides of the Atlantic outspoken for the rights of blacks and indigenous people of color in the colony. France violently represses this activism, which leads to the beginning of the Haitian Revolution of 1791. It continues for more than a decade, destroying much of Haiti's agricultural resources and infrastructure. On December 4th, 1803, the French forces surrendered to Jean-Jacques Dessalines in the northwestern commune of Gonabes, which I can't pronounce French either. For the first time in over 300 years, Haiti is once again an independent nation. And actually, because, I'm sure you know this, the language of Haiti is French because of the long time of the French occupation and because people spoke what their overseers told them to speak. So the indigenous language of the settlers of Haiti was lost, and now French is the national language of Haiti. 1804 to 1820, a fractured peace and civil war. In 1804, Dessalines, the guy who won the Civil War, assumed the role of Governor General, and as a precursor to the problems of Haiti, he declares himself emperor later that year and is assassinated 2 years later. This is the difference Washington makes in your political history. Our George Washington, people approached him to be president for life, to be the king of America. He said, to heck with that, I'm going back to Mount Vernon. He served his term and he went back. This is the difference, and this we'll be looking into. This is part of my investigation into, and I've mentioned this before, what happens to democracies. It's not just because dictatorship is imposed on them from the top. All these dictators are supported by a willing populace, not even a majority of the populace. Right now, we have 30 to 40% of the American populace that would have overthrown a legal election and put another person as the president by just rule of law or rule of illegal, of no law, basically. That is the danger we face, and that is what in Haiti they surrendered to this, and this is the result of it. This leads to a Haitian civil war between the North and the South that lasts until 1820. Reunification following the second peace excludes black Haitians from power. They're going backwards. 1825 to 1914, independence, but at a cost. French King Charles X agreed to formally recognize Haiti as an independent nation, provided they paid 150 million francs in reparations. That is approximately $21 billion. That's the 21 billion the Times comes up with as figures. Haiti takes out high interest loans from America, German, and French banks. Not just French banks, American and Germans get in on this too. They take the cream off the top of the coffee and sugar production. To cover the cost, approximately 80% of the country's annual national budget and 10 times its annual revenue went to pay their debt. This debt was not paid off until 1947. It wasn't something that ended in the last century. 1947 was when they made their last payment. In 1838, France reduces this debt from 150 to 90 million francs, in other words, 12.6 billion. The final payment is on to France and loans from the United States is in 1947, 150 years after independence. There have been numerous civil wars. They had a fight with Saint Domingo, the neighboring country. Over 30,000 Haitians were killed. They were living in the kind of no man's land between the two because of the revolution that was going on in Haiti, the Civil War. And then the Dominican Republic, the people from that country didn't want the Haitians in their country, so they massacred over 30,000 Haitians. 1954 to 71, Papa Doc Duvalier is in power, a dictator. 1971 to 1986, Papa Doc's son, Baby Doc Duvalier, is in power. 1987 to 1988, a person named Magnagat was elected and promptly overthrown. 1990 to 2004, elected, exiled, re-elected, and re-exiled. This is the person named Averill. He resigns among protests. A former Silesian priest, Aristide, wins the country's first free and peaceful democratic elections, 67% of the popular vote. His rule is interrupted in 1991 by a coup led by a man named Cedrus. Aristide is exiled, and Cedrus himself gives up power and enters exile in September of that year. Aristide returns in 1994. His reforms included increasing access to healthcare and education, improving the country's judicial system and civil rights, doubling the minimum wage, food distribution to those suffering from hunger, and livelihood support and training, and dissolving the military. After a presidential term by René Préval, 1996 to 2000, Aristide is re-elected despite claims of fraud. Several failed attempts to overthrow Aristide's government result in conflict across the country led by armed groups. Aristide is forced to resign in 2004 and leaves for South Africa. A multinational UN peacekeeping force returns to the country to maintain security. 2004 to 2008, floods, hurricanes, Hurricane Ivan, Hurricane Jeannie, 3,000 killed, another 250,000 homeless. Flooding destroys key rice and fruit harvests. Less than a year later, Hurricane Dennis causes an additional $50 million in damages. 2008 sees a string of natural disasters within 1 month, including tropical storms Faye and Hannah, Hurricanes Gustav and Ike destroying 25% of the nation's economy. 2010 to 2015, earthquake, cholera, further instability. Their president was assassinated. The cholera is a particularly sad story. The UN peacekeeping troops came from Nepal, and they've been through DNA testing and everything else. The UN troops are the ones who brought cholera to Haiti. It was not endemic. It was not already there. It was brought by the UN troops and killed hundreds and thousands of people with the cholera epidemic. So that country has been cursed from the beginning. But how much is choice, and how much choice do they have? How much control do the people have? It seems like you have no control when there are armed forces against you. But somewhere, somehow, people like George Washington and the Patriots in America made a difference. If you think about it, many Americans were loyal to the king and fought on the side of the king. A lot of those people left the country and went to Canada, and a lot of them went back to England. But the forces for patriotism and democracy prevailed in that case. What makes the difference in one country where they prevail and one country where they don't? I don't have the answer, but we will continue to look at it as we go along. Okay. So thanks to Roberta for getting us onto Haiti, and anybody is welcome. Please bring any information you have in the future.
And thanks for picking up on that, Tim.
Well, you know me, I like to read and I like to look into stuff and I like to talk, so it all kind of comes together. You have to suffer.
Just a quick suggestion for future too, unless I missed it in your presentations, why was Hispaniola divided into two? When did that happen? And why is one more stable? You answered the question, why is less stable?
Yes, we'll have to, and I did not see anywhere indicated. But if you remember Dominican Republic, does the name Trujillo strike any memory chords with anybody? Dominican Republic also had a dictator for years and years and years. And sometimes when you have a dictator, and this is one of the reasons that some people choose to have a dictator, choose to have a king or a ruler. A good king or a good ruler is far more effective and far more beneficial than a poor democracy where everybody fights back and forth and you have to compromise. The Roman Republic did really well until the people of Rome actually chose to have a dictator. They chose to have an emperor. And Rome did pretty well along the way until they ran into Caligula and some of the emperors that were unbelievably bad. And that is the problem. The only way to get rid of an emperor is a revolution or an assassination. And once you start doing that, and I don't know how many saw the news, the judge in, where was it, Wisconsin? I can't remember there's a judge that was assassinated by a member of the militia who also had on, the governor of Michigan was on his list. He had 4 or 5 people on his list and assassinated this judge because of the judge's political leanings. We are starting down that road here, but I'm digressing again. So, our offering, please put in what you will, take out something if you need. And we're going to hear a medley of Langren of hymns. Very nice. All right, our closing hymn is 410. Surprised by Joy. hope, and love, here comes alive. Life's deepest treasure is made known when in forgiving, giving all, inseparably two are as one. All right. A Faith for the Free by James Luther Adams. A faith that is not the sister of justice is bound to bring people to grief. It thwarts creation, a divinely given possibility. It robs them of their birthright of freedom in an open universe. It robs the community of the spiritual richness latent in its members. It reduces the person to a beast of burden in slavish subservience to a state, a church, or a party, a God made by human hands. A faith that is not the sister of justice is bound to bring people to grief. How many of you heard the Methodist Church is splitting into two churches? The Methodist Church that we know has affirmed LGBTQ plus. 70 or 80 churches, I think, in Georgia and throughout the South have declined to do that, so they are forming their own separate Methodist church called the World Methodist Church, I think. So let us not forget, a faith that is not the sister of justice is bound to bring people to grief. All right, that finishes our service. New Madison, Universalist, Unitarian Universalist Church. Have a good week. As always, I will remind you, wear your masks when you go out. The virus is not dead. It's not gone. I know nobody believes that, but it is rising, particularly on the East Coast, and it is heading in this direction. And once again, I'm not going to talk about monkeypox. All right, our postlude is So Long, It's Been Good to Know You. Thanks to Lloyd and Margaret for the music, which we couldn't do without, or not Lloyd and Roberta. And Roberta for the beautiful roses. These actually are antique roses that actually smell like roses, which you won't get in Kroger anymore. There are snacks. They came from Walmart, had a discount bin this time, so that's where they came from. What else? There was something else. I can't think of whatever it was. So have a good week. Be careful, be safe, and come back next week if you can. Oh, Margaret for the picture. Margaret has a picture of the sea turtle I want everybody to see. It's back here.
No, Floyd is on.